He handed my wedding ring to another man like it was nothing more than a set of car keys. And the worst part, he didn't even look at me when he did it. My name is Alina Marsh, and for 11 years, I built an empire beside my husband, Daniel Marsh. Everyone knew the name. Marsh Logistics. 42 trucks, 3 warehouses, contracts with half the shipping companies on the East Coast. What they didn't know was that I was the one who built the spreadsheets at midnight while he slept. I was the one who talked our first bank loan officer out of rejecting us. I was the one who held everything together with my bare hands, while he shook the hands that got photographed. I'm telling you this now because I want you to understand something before I tell you what he did. I didn't lose everything because I was weak. I lost everything because I trusted the wrong man with the truth of who I was. And then I took it all back. It started on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were our quiet dinners, just the two of us. No business partners, no clients, just Daniel and me at the kitchen island eating whatever I'd thrown together after a long day. That particular Tuesday, he came home late, smelling faintly of a cologne that wasn't his usual brand. I didn't say anything. I told myself it was a client dinner. I told myself a lot of things that year. "You're quiet," he said, loosening his tie, not quite meeting my eyes. "Long day," I said, which was true. It was always true. That was the thing about our marriage. The truth was always technically there, just never the whole of it. He sat down across from me and picked at his food, and I watched him, really watched him, the way you watch someone when some part of you already knows something is wrong but hasn't found the words for it yet. His hands were different that night, restless. He kept touching his own wedding band, twisting it like it itched. I didn't know yet that 3 days later, he would take mine off my hand while I slept and give it to Ryan Seal, his best friend since college, the man who stood beside him at our wedding, the man who once told me, with tears in his eyes, that Daniel was lucky to have found someone like me. I found out by accident. Isn't that always how it happens? The truth doesn't knock politely. It kicks the door down when you're least prepared for it. I'd gone to get my ring resized. It had been loose for months, and I'd finally made the appointment. I opened my jewelry box that Friday morning, humming some tune I don't even remember now, reaching for the small velvet pouch where I kept it when I wasn't wearing it. It was empty. I stood there for a long moment, staring into that empty pouch like it might somehow refill itself if I looked hard enough. My mind went through every reasonable explanation. Maybe I'd left it in the bathroom. Maybe it had fallen behind the dresser. I searched everywhere, methodically at first, then less so, my hands starting to shake as 30 minutes turned into an hour and the ring did not appear. I called Daniel. He didn't pick up. I called again, straight to voicemail. I don't know what made me check his email. We'd never been the type of couple who monitored each other, or so I believed foolishly for 11 years. But something in me, some old animal instinct, pulled me toward his laptop that morning, and it was open, and there it was. An email thread with a jeweler downtown. Subject line: "Ray, custom engraving rush order." My husband had taken my wedding ring, the one his grandmother had passed down to him, the one he swore he'd chosen for me because it reminded him of who I was before all the money, sturdy, quiet, unbreakable, and he had sent it to be re-engraved. For Ryan. I read the email 3 times before it made sense. Ryan wasn't getting my ring as a gift, exactly. He was getting it because Daniel owed him money, a lot of money, from some investment scheme gone wrong that I had never once heard about in 11 years of shared finances. And rather than sell an asset from the business, rather than touch his own accounts, rather than tell me any of it, Daniel had taken the one thing that was mine. Not community property, not company equity. Mine. I sat in that kitchen for I don't know how long. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming, could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, and I remember thinking, with a kind of eerie calm that scared me more than crying would have, so this is what betrayal actually feels like. Not fireworks, not screaming, just silence and an empty velvet pouch and the sound of a life quietly ending around you while the walls stay exactly the same. I didn't confront him that day. I want you to understand why. Rage that comes out too early gets wasted on shouting, and I did not intend to waste mine. Instead, I called our accountant, a woman named Priyanka who had worked with us since the beginning, and I asked her, very calmly, to pull every account, every ledger, every filing from the last 3 years. I told her I was doing an internal audit. She didn't ask questions. She'd worked with me long enough to know when my voice meant business and not conversation. That night, Daniel came home at 8. He kissed my forehead like nothing had happened, like the last 3 days hadn't cracked something open in me that would never fully close again. "Good day," he asked, pouring himself a glass of wine. "Fine," I said. "Yours?" "Long. Ryan's got some stuff going on. I helped him out with something." My hand did not shake when I lifted my water glass. I want you to know that. 11 years of building an empire teaches you how to keep your hands steady even when your whole world is collapsing. "That's kind of you," I said. He smiled at me, this soft, guilty, oblivious smile, and went to change out of his suit, and I sat there thinking about the ring on Ryan's desk somewhere, being fitted with new engravings, being made to fit someone else's finger, someone else's life. And I made a decision so quiet and so final that even I didn't fully understand its size yet. I decided I was going to find out everything, every account, every hidden transfer, every lie stacked on top of another lie for who knew how many years. And when I had it all, when I understood exactly how deep the rot went, I was going to take back what was mine, not with tears, not with a screaming match in our kitchen, but with the same tools Daniel had used to build his empire in the first place. Contracts, signatures, numbers that don't lie even when the people behind them do. 3 weeks later, Priyanka called me with a shaking voice and said 4 words that changed everything. Priyanka's voice on the phone that afternoon didn't sound like the woman I'd known for 8 years. It sounded thin, careful, like she was reading from a script she didn't want to read. "I've been through the last 3 years," she said. "Elena, there's an account. A shell company, actually. Seal Ventures LLC. Ryan's name is on the filing, but the money moving through it, it's coming from Marsh Logistics operating funds. Almost $400,000 over 18 months. I remember gripping the counter with my free hand, not because I was surprised exactly, but because hearing the number out loud made it real in a way that suspicion never could. "Show me everything," I said. "Every wire, every date, every signature." "Elena." "Everything, Priyanka, please." She sent the files that evening. I sat at our dining table long after Daniel had gone to bed, scrolling through spreadsheets by lamplight, watching 11 years of my work get quietly siphoned into a hole with my husband's best friend's name stamped on the bottom of it. It wasn't just the ring anymore. The ring was small. The ring was almost funny, in the way that the smallest betrayal sometimes tells you the truth about the biggest one. Daniel hadn't just given away something sentimental in a moment of panic. He'd been bleeding our company dry for a year and a half to cover Ryan's failed investments, and he had done it using signatures that, on closer inspection, were not entirely his own. Some of them were mine. Forged, not badly. Daniel knew my handwriting the way you know the handwriting of someone you've loved for over a decade, but forged all the same, on wire authorization forms that gave Ryan's shell company access to funds that legally required my sign-off as co-owner of Marsh Logistics. I sat with that for a long time, longer than I sat with the ring, if I'm honest, because a man can lie to your face and you can almost forgive it as weakness. But a man who forges your name, who steals your signature the way he stole your ring, isn't weak. He's calculated, and calculated men don't stop until someone makes them. I didn't cry that night. I want you to understand that, because I think people expect the crying to come first. Mine came much later, in small private moments, in the shower, in the car, once in the frozen food aisle of a grocery store for no reason I could explain to the woman who asked if I was all right. But that night, at that table, there were no tears, just a cold, clear, terrible clarity. I called my lawyer the next morning. Not our lawyer, Daniel and I had shared one for years, a genial man named Frank Doss who'd done our wills and our first business contracts. I called a different one. A woman named Corrine Ashworth, recommended by a friend from a networking group, who specialized, as it happened, in exactly this kind of thing. Business fraud, marital asset disputes, the quiet, surgical unraveling of empires built on lies. "Bring me everything," she said, in a voice that reminded me a little of my own from the night before. "And Alina, don't confront him yet. Not until we have it locked down. The moment he knows you know, he'll start covering his tracks, and men like this always have somewhere to hide things." So I waited. God, the waiting was its own kind of grief. I sat across from Daniel at dinner for 6 more weeks, watching him talk about quarterly numbers and new contracts, watching him smile at me like I was still the woman who didn't know anything. And every single time, I felt something in my chest go a little more still, a little more resolved. "You've been distant," he said one night, maybe 4 weeks in. We were doing dishes, an old habit from before the money, before the trucks and the warehouses, him washing, me drying, something we still did because it was one of the few things that felt untouched by everything else. "Work's been a lot," I said. "You'd tell me if something was wrong, right?" I looked at him then, really looked, and for one strange, aching second, I saw the boy I'd fallen in love with at 26, nervous, ambitious, terrified of failing, holding my hand in a bank lobby before our first loan meeting like I was the only steady thing in his life. I felt the old love rise in me, unbidden, unwanted, and then I felt it curdle into something else entirely. "Of course," I said, "I'd tell you." He never asked about the ring, not once in those 6 weeks. I think some part of him had decided that if he didn't bring it up, it hadn't happened. That's the thing about men who lie easily. They start to believe silence is the same thing as forgiveness. Karine and Priyanka built the case in the background like 2 surgeons prepping for an operation. We traced every wire. We documented every forged signature with a handwriting analyst. We found out that Ryan's investment scheme, some cryptocurrency mining operation that promised absurd returns, had collapsed almost a year earlier, and that every dollar Daniel funneled to him since had gone not toward recovering losses, but toward paying off Ryan's other debts. Gambling debts, as it turned out. My husband had drained our company to protect a man who was drowning in his own recklessness, and he had used my name, my signature, my wedding ring to do it. The day we were ready, I asked Daniel to come home early. I told him I wanted to talk about expanding the Charlotte warehouse. He came home practically glowing, already imagining the number. Karine was already there when he walked in. So was Priyanka. So was a man from Marsh Logistics Board, because yes, I want you to know, I had quietly become majority shareholder 2 years earlier when Daniel needed capital fast, and I'd been the one to provide it, structuring the deal at the time, simply because I loved him and wanted to help. I never imagined I'd need that leverage. I never imagined I'd need anything. Daniel's face, when he saw them sitting at our dining table with folders spread out like a deck of cards, told me everything about how much he'd known, deep down, that this day was coming. "Alina, what is this?" "Sit down, Daniel." Are you serious right now? You brought lawyers into our house." "Sit down," I said again, and something in my voice made him do it. Karine laid it out plainly, without cruelty, without theater, just fact after fact after fact, until his face went the color of old paper. The wires, the forged signatures, the shell company, Ryan's debts dressed up as an investment. My ring sitting somewhere on Ryan Seal's hand right now, engraved with words that used to belong to me. "I can explain," Daniel said, and I almost laughed because that's always what they say, isn't it? As if an explanation could somehow unforge a signature. As if an explanation could put a ring back where it belonged. "You don't get to explain," I said. My voice didn't shake. I'd practiced that, if I'm honest, practiced it in the mirror, in the car, in the shower, so that when this moment finally came, he would not get the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. "You had 11 years to explain things to me, Daniel. You had 11 years to just tell me the truth. Instead, you took the one thing on my body that was only mine, and you gave it to a man who couldn't manage his own life, to cover debts you never once mentioned. And you forged my name to do it. I was going to fix it. You weren't fixing anything. You were bleeding us dry." He looked at Priyanka, at Karine, at the board member, searching for some ally, some soft place to land, and found none. That was the moment, I think, that he understood the full shape of what I'd built quietly around him while he thought I was simply grieving a missing piece of jewelry. As majority shareholder, Karine said calmly, Alina has the authority to remove you as CEO for cause, given the documented fraud and unauthorized transfers. We're also filing to freeze Seal Ventures accounts and recovering the transferred funds through both civil action and, if necessary, criminal referral. Criminal, Daniel's voice cracked. Alina, you can't be serious. This would destroy me. You destroyed yourself, I said, and for the first time since that empty velvet pouch, I felt something other than grief rise in my chest. Something that felt almost like relief. I'm just the one who finally turned on the lights. The following months were their own kind of war, quieter than people expect, fought mostly in filing cabinets and depositions rather than screaming matches. Ryan tried, briefly, to claim he didn't know the ring was mine, that Daniel had told him it was a family heirloom being passed down. I didn't believe him. I don't think anyone believed him. He returned it eventually, through a courier, in a small brown box with no note, and I remember holding it in my palm and feeling nothing where I expected to feel everything. It was just metal. The meaning had already left it. Daniel lost the company within the year. Not to me directly, I never wanted to be the woman who took Marsh Logistics from her husband out of spite, but to the truth, which is a much more patient and thorough thief than any wife could ever be. The board voted him out. The forged signatures alone were enough for that. The civil suit recovered most of what he'd funneled to Ryan, though not all of it. Some debts, once spent, simply vanish into the world, unrecoverable, the way trust does. I kept the company. I run it now, fully, the way I always secretly had, except now my name is on the door instead of hiding quietly behind his. 42 trucks became 51. We opened a 4th warehouse last spring. Sometimes clients still ask, out of old habit, to speak to Mr. Marsh, and I simply smile and tell them Mr. Marsh no longer works here, and would they like to speak with the owner instead. Daniel calls sometimes, though less and less as the months pass. His voice on those calls is smaller than I remember it being, humbled in a way that used to be unimaginable to me. I don't hate him anymore. I think that surprises people when I tell this story. I don't hate him, I simply stopped needing anything from him at all, and it turns out that was the thing he could never survive. Not my anger, my indifference. I wear the ring sometimes still, not as a symbol of him, but as a reminder of myself. Of the woman who sat alone at a kitchen table with an empty velvet pouch and decided, quietly, without a single tear yet shed, that she was not going to be the one who lost everything. He thought giving away my ring was a small, forgivable thing, a debt quietly settled between old friends. He never once imagined that the woman he handed it away from would be the one left standing, in full daylight, holding everything he used to call his. And that, I think, is the real ending of this story. Not the ring, not the money, not even the company. It's the moment a woman who has spent years being quiet finally understands her own strength and decides, once and for all, to use it. Alina, you need to sit down.